Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ray Tampa Podcast. Our podcast offers bold commentary on various subject matters with a laser-like focus on the truth. My name is Ray Tampa, and I'm the host of the Ray Tampa Podcast. We have in our studio Mr. Russell Cato, a retired educator with more than 40 plus years of experience in the Pinellas County schools, and Mr. Jamie Wilson, a healthcare provider with more than 25 years of experience working as a physical therapist. My co-host, my dynamic co-host. On December 31st, 2024, the Tampa Bay Times published an opinion piece written by former Mayor Rick Baker about his family's visit to President Carter's church in Plains, Georgia, for Bible study class. On Thursday, January 8th, Bay News 9 played a clip in rotation about that very same subject. Today, we have the man of the hour, live and in living color, here to discuss it all. Two, we're going to reflect on the legacy of President Carter as shared by many family members, friends, and colleagues at his well-planned, very moving funeral. Mayor Baker, welcome to the Ray Tampa Podcast.
It is always good to be here. I did the Times column and the Bay News 9 piece as kind of a warm-up for the Ray Tampa Podcast. That's the way I take it. That's the thing. There's no doubt about that.
You're so smart.
That's a go.
That's my warm-up rounds.
Hey,
That's a go.
being that the case,
That's a go.
Mayor, you along with your family made a decision to visit President Carter's hometown. What was the reason for that visit?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, Ray and Russell and Jamie. Thank you for having me on the show.
By all means.
We go up to, my family goes up to North Carolina every year, and we go really up 75, which is not too far from Plains as we're going up. And first of all, let me just say, I never voted for Jimmy Carter. I voted for his opponents both times because I really didn't agree with him politically too much, although I thought the Camp David Accord that he did with Egypt and Israel was one of the great things that happened, the last 50 years, 100 years. But a lot of things I just didn't agree with him. But I always thought very highly of him as a man and as a Christian and as a man. And I felt that he was a person that worked his faith. He lived his faith. And he, not only before he was president, but after he was president, especially after. He's probably one of the best former presidents we have ever had in American history, I think, in terms of what he accomplished and what he did. And I always had great respect for it. Well, I heard, and it seemed unbelievable, but I heard that he was still doing Bible studies at his church on Sundays, and that you could come. I read a little article someplace about it. I don't know where I saw it. So I Googled a little bit about it before we were going up to North Carolina. I said, well, I wonder if he's doing it on this Sunday as I'm going up, And if he was, then I would plan my trip around that Bible study. And if he would, there's a little town right outside of Plains where they have a hotel. That's about it. And so I planned around it. So it turned out, as best I could tell, I thought he was going to do it. He was doing it, and he was going to do it that Sunday. And then I called the hotel and I'm losing the name of the little city that's right next to Plains, but it's where Andersonville Prison is from the Civil War. And I I called the hotel and I talked to the clerk at the hotel. You know, if you ever want to know stuff, talk to the clerk at the hotel. And it's like talking to the waitress at a diner when you go to a town. You know, you're going to learn about the town. And so I talked to her, and she gave me all the details. She said, "This is this. This is this. You got to come 2 hours ahead of time. You go through security. This is the time you got to be there." And so I said, do you need clearance ahead of time? Do you need an invite? No, just do it. And I thought, well, this is pretty amazing, you know. So my family made plans, and we rented reserved a hotel room at this hotel, and we just made plans to come see him. So that and the reason was, yes, that the question. I'm a politician. I never get to the answer on these things, but the reason was, I wanted to expose my children to that. I wanted my children to see Jimmy Carter, hear from Jimmy Carter, and realize here's a former president of the United States giving a Bible study, and I wanted them to see that, just that the fact that happens.
Awesome. Well, being that you attended Bible study led by Carter, what was your main takeaway from that study?
Well, it's interesting, and I brought a picture of it here on my phone. I brought my Bible with me, and I took notes. You know, some people, there are two schools of thought in Christianity. One is writing Bibles, one is don't write Bibles. Well, I'm in the writing Bibles school of Christianity. So we separate, my faith.
I like that.
But I have, so you can still see. I'll just show you my notes from the book. That's from the Acts 6. It was he preached on Acts 6 that day. And this, by the way, his Bible study was like 45 minutes, and then he went into the service, and he sat right across the aisle with his wife, right across the aisle from my daughter, when we were at that. And his Bible study was from Acts 6. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm not going to give the whole Bible study, but he talked about, he was doing a series on what it means to be a Christian. and so this day was about service and about showing your Christianity through service. And I just got this fellow's name, Jerome Eldridge, who was a missionary to West Africa that he talked about, that came and dug wells and built a bridge and set up new churches all over Africa. And he talked about what this man had done, and he was from Jimmy Carter's church. And he talked about what he had done and how what essentially that was. It was, and here's the quote from Jimmy, President Carter: acts of kindness and care are the best witness. You don't need to be a pastor or a deacon.
Right.
If you show acts of care and decency and kindness, that is a way of exemplifying your Christian faith, and obviously it's true and a powerful lesson, and how powerful for my children to be there to receive that lesson. It was a great moment.
Well, very, very commendable of you to try and expose your kids to this.
Well, and I think, Ray, is that I just think we live in an amazing country. I just think we live in an amazing. It's not a perfect country. There's still things. There's still work to be done. But it's an amazing country, and it's amazing because you have a peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia, right, and he becomes president of the United States, and he becomes leader of the free world.
Yeah.
And I mean, first of all, how does that even happen? How many countries can that even happen in?
That's a good point, because Andrew Young, when he was speaking during the service,
I watched that.
Yeah, he questioned, how did he become president?
Yeah.
Just a few minutes before you came in, Jamie Googled the population of Plains, Georgia. 500 and some people.
Today, it's probably less
More-
then,
Yeah.
More people in Walmart.
I don't think he had electricity when he was born there. I think that
Probably.
story.
Wow.
And so yeah, you're right. More people in Walmart on a given Sunday. and yet he becomes president. But you know what? I don't think that's the most amazing part of the story.
Okay, what's the most amazing part?
The most amazing part of the story is the leader of the free world
I know it.
comes back to Plains, Georgia, and on a Sunday, uninvited, I'm there with about 150 people, and he's given us a Bible study. That is to me maybe even more amazing than the first part. How often that I don't think there is another president that's ever done that I'm aware of. Certainly not in my lifetime. And it seems like with so many people, they get done being president, they want to go on the speaking tour, make millions of dollars in bookstores and all this. And the idea, no, that's not. He did write a lot of books.
Yeah, he wrote about 30 books.
And I read 2 of his books. I
Yeah.
brought my books that I read with me to show my children, which I think, and I know he wrote a lot more, and I probably started a couple of the other ones, but the Blood of Abraham was I think a tremendous book. It talks about how the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths all stem from Abraham,
Oh,
and what he tried to do at Camp David, and how he tried to bring people together and focus on the commonality that they had in faith, and I think it's a very powerful book. And then I think it was his memoirs, Keeping Faith, was a great book as well, and I've read both of those books, and so he was prolific writing
Mhm.
books, but he wasn't cashing in.
Right.
He wasn't
Right.
cashing in, making the big. He lives in the same house he lived before he became president, and I just thought he's just a decent man, and then so during the Bible study, to me it was very surreal to be sitting there in Bible study, and then afterwards we had the church service, and then after that, he went to a garden in the back and took pictures with everybody, him and Rosalind,
Okay.
and so I have a family picture with
Nice.
a lot of different pictures. I took a lot of pictures during the service of him and everything, and it's just and while we were in line going through security and stuff like that, and it was outside of his church and stuff. So, anyways, it's just I've had a chance. I've been to the White House for a state dinner with the Prime Minister of Japan, and I've been to the White House for dinner a couple times, and I've met presidents probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 times in my life, and both act while they were president,
mhm.
and some afterwards. And it's always an exciting thing, it's always an exciting, surreal thing to meeting the leader of the free world. But there's something just very special about getting a Bible study from President of the United States.
And I gathered as much when I read your article. It was a very straightforward, touching article that made you feel like you really understood how you felt about that issue. And I have a question here related to that. Before I ask the question, I want to give my co-host an opportunity to chime in with a question or two. Either one of you.
Yeah,
ready?
so I have a question. So I hear he was in the military. He was
He
on
was a naval.
a naval, yeah. And he was on a submarine.
Nuclear, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was, I think he came out of Annapolis and was, I believe he was, I think engineering. I think he was an engineer, a nuclear engineer out of Annapolis. He was not a dumb guy. He was a smart man.
He was
And,
valedictorian.
what's that?
He was valedictorian out of his class.
In
Yeah.
high school. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a smart fella. And yeah, went to Annapolis,
Yeah.
went to so his life was of service. It was
Right.
the Navy, it was the and then when his dad died, he went back to Plains to do the peanut farm, and which I read a story about this recently after he died. His wife did not want to go back to Plains. And, they're now in the Navy and going forward in that career, and he quit that career so he could go back and run the peanut farm.
Interesting. Rosalind didn't want to go back, but he went back anyway.
I think it turned out okay for him. But
Yeah.
she probably was okay by the time it was
The
over.
way he loved her,
He did.
Question
He did.
him doing something she didn't want to do.
I think she was Wasn't it? I think the story was, and I'm not, and I, if I may get some stories wrong today, but I think Jimmy Carter's wife was a midwife that delivered Rosalind when she was born, and so he literally knew her from the day she was born.
Okay.
That's a great long term love affair. It just
Mayor, in your article, you pointed out that, and you've said it here, you've already said it, that you were not aligned with the president in terms of politics, political views.
right.
However, you still respected and admired the character of the man. Do you mind identifying 3 or 4 of those character traits? And you may have already said 3 or
Sure.
4
Sure.
that you admired.
Well, yeah, I think first, I guess as a Christian, I think the first one for me would be the adherence to his faith, you know,
Okay.
and the lifetime adherence to his faith.
Good.
And I would say that probably all of his other great characteristics emanate from his faith.
Correct.
And I think if we are, and I don't be, I trust me, I don't pretend to be perfect myself. I sin all the time and I make mistakes. But if we're a true adherence to our faith, then we're going to reflect the other characters. And I think that one of them would be humility. And I think he was, you know, as humble as you can be when you're president of the United States. But I think he was a humble man. And you know, the Bible says. Um, um, not I'm not just as the person. It's like arrogance comes before the fall, but that's not the word it uses. It's pride. Pride comes before the fall, and you never felt him to be a prideful man at all. He seemed to be a very humble man. I think he was a very committed family man, and he was and he loved his country, and he was committed to the concept of service. And I'm not sure I think he just saw, you know, I always felt that way about the mayor's job, is that it's just an extension of service. It's, you know, there you do, if you have a servant's heart, then you find different ways in your life and at different times to reflect that and to activate it. And I think he did that, whether it was in the Navy, whether it was even working in his father's company and keeping the farm going, whether it was serving as governor of Georgia, whether it was serving as president and trying to best that he could keep the presidency honest to the character of the country, or what the character of the country that we hope we would. And then when he got done, and he worked obviously to help disease around the country, but also he, you know, the obvious Habitat for Humanity was probably the greatest reflection of what he did. I was very involved in Habitat for Humanity when I was mayor. When we had vacant lots in the city, I contributed lots of vacant lots to Habitat so they could build homes on them, folks. And I think that's a wonderful charity, wonderful thing. And he didn't just go on the board.
Yeah.
You know, he got hammered in there. And I saw a recent political cartoon within the last 2 or 3 days, and it was Jesus greeting Jimmy Carter at the Golden Gates with kind of a hammer belt.
Cool, right on.
And the caption was, you know, from one carpenter to another. I thought that was.
That's nice.
So
Yeah.
I think he exemplified all those
Yeah.
characteristics. So, and I think you can. I think, you know, it's such a shame we seem to, in our society, and I think the media drives this. We feel that if we're not on the same political side, or if we disagree with you politically, we have to hate you, and we have to demonize you, and we have to make other people really. We have to say the meanest, nastiest things we can about you. We have to try to dig the dirt about you, and we have to try to tear you apart. that's happened to me, in my political career, and it's not fun, and it's not right. It's you should be able to disagree with people without hating them, and I think that's important.
Even before the death of Carter and the funeral and all the nice tributes, etc., I sent you a text and I said, history is going to be kind to you
Mhm.
because people can appreciate, and I'm speaking for myself for the most part, can appreciate your leadership a lot more with the passing of time.
Right.
And especially in light of some of the ones that followed you,
Yeah.
can force more appreciation of you.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening with Carter. People are appreciating him more and more with the passing of time, because during the funeral, I heard things that I had no idea of. I didn't know that he had accomplished many of the things expressed during the funeral. And I say, whoa, yes, there were issues during his presidency. But my God, most of us didn't know all of this.
I saw one of the commentators that referred to it. I think Jimmy Carter took offense to this at the time. But during his life, a commentator referred to him as that he's the only president that used the presidency as a warm up to a life of service, and
Hmm.
Carter didn't like that because he thought, well, that's kind of diminishes his presidency. But I think what it was really saying was how much he accomplished after he left
After he
office,
left.
and
Yes.
and it was, what I watched that service. Of course, you love watching Andrew Young, but and how powerful Andrew Young got up there. He didn't have any notes. He just was clearly just speaking from the heart, wasn't he?
Mhm.
And that was cool. Go ahead.
No, it's what I was telling Ray about Jimmy Carter said to you. If Jesus Christ could come back down on this earth today and choose a disciple, it would be Jimmy Carter.
I think you're probably right.
And the reason, there's a word I want to use here. It's called empathyism.
I'm sorry.
Empathyism.
Okay.
What it means that what Carter had was compassion and understanding of other people. That is not, you can't find it in people today. That's what his strong point was. And I was telling Ray, for a person to be born in Plainsville, Georgia, White Citizen Council, he himself, when the integration of the school system started, and White Citizen Council came to him and said, listen, we can't have this. He disagreed with them. Now, could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Could you imagine that?
And I think you're right. The empathy and the
Yeah.
and the understanding the needs of others. That my daughter has got. I'll brag about my daughter a little bit. She's got a characteristic where, when she sees somebody, and she's talking to them, she can see what maybe the hurt or the problem, and she starts digging into it. And most I don't I'm not. I try to be empathetic with people, but I don't have that eye that she's got.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great trait, and of course that comes right out of his faith, of course. And
I'm so interested in what you just said, and I just dug up some notes that I had written on this torn envelope, and it's about you. The article you wrote, as far as I'm concerned, show that you have the ability to know another man's heart. And you're saying your daughter can do that.
yeah,
That's an
Yeah.
interesting point.
yeah, you can.
Got it from you because you could see Jimmy Carter's heart,
Yeah.
understand and appreciate his heart,
Yeah,
the character.
yeah. Another part of the funeral, it was really it was a cool funeral in so many ways. And you know, it's you don't, when somebody lives to 100 years old, you don't really feel sad. You know, you're in a mood to celebrate their life, but you feel, you know, they ran the race, you know,
Yeah.
and they
Mhm.
ran the race hard. They what a great race he ran, and what a great life he led. But so you can have maybe not quite the, I mean, obviously his family members are going to miss him, and that and all of that, and usually at the end, we've all experienced this with parents and grandparents, is it's usually a hard turn at the end there, you know, the last year or two. But I think the celebration piece of it with Jimmy Carter is an easy one to do. One of the things I really enjoyed about it was Gerald Ford's son came and read an eulogy that Gerald
Ford
Ford
had written
read. Gerald Ford probably died 15 years ago or so.
06.
Oh, 06. Okay, yeah. So he read Gerald Ford's eulogy that he wrote, and evidently, according to the stories, you know, Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter made a pact while they were both alive that we're both going to speak at each other's eulogies. We're going to write them now, and one will be in person, and one will be not in person. And I thought,
That's
what the rule, and Jimmy Carter beat Gerald Ford in the election for president. He defeated Gerald Ford for president. It kind of reminds me of Bill Clinton defeated George H.W. Bush. And Bill Clinton almost became like another son to George H.W. Bush later.
Mhm.
They developed such a close
Right.
relationship
Right.
afterwards. But I think probably not as close as the Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter relationship.
I want to speak. Either of you want to say something?
No, I want to tell them, I'm gonna let you say, you know what amazed me about Jimmy Carter though, and that Camp David thing? And looking at the playtime and the environment, it was Jimmy Carter who told the Israeli government, you know what? You using the apartheid system
For the
again.
Palestinians.
That's
Yeah,
right.
He did
That's
say that.
hell of a thing to say.
He did say that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to what you said about them becoming friends, Carter and Ford,
Ford, yeah.
and the fact that Ford's son shared the eulogy that his dad had written since he couldn't be there to deliver it.
Wasn't that kind of surreal? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you're
Like
listening to
very
somebody that
forward
died
thinking.
16 years ago,
And-
and you're listening to him speak right now.
I want to share some of that with you. I have notes here. Former President Gerald Ford's son, Stephen, that's his name, delivered the eulogy for President Carter that was written by his dad prior to his death in 2006. He wrote, "By faith of a brief season, Jimmy Carter and I were rivals, but for many wonderful years that followed, friendship bonded us as no two presidents had since John Adams and Thomas Jefferson." He continued saying, "It's a long distance from Flint, Michigan to Plains, Georgia. But distances have a way of vanishing when measured in values rather than miles. And it was because of our shared values. Jimmy and I respected each other as rivals before we cherished each other as friends." That's strong.
It is
Written by
strong.
Ford prior to his death for his son to deliver.
It was an interesting time. I'm sorry, did you have a
Don, you wanted to say something else? Fine. Go ahead.
it was an interesting time. We had Watergate and Richard Nixon's second term of president, when he was forced to resign after the second year of his second term.
Mhm.
And they and his vice president had to resign, Spiro Agnew, because of a tax something or other. And so Richard Nixon had to pick somebody to become vice president, and he had to, and it was likely there at the time it was pretty clear there could be a good chance Richard Nixon may not be around for long, in terms of being president. And so you had to find somebody of impeccable character that the country would accept, because they were not going to be elected to either vice president or president. And so you had to find somebody that could keep the country going and have respect for it. And they picked Gerald Ford because he also, like Carter, had great character and great respect. He was a congressman, and he was highly respected in by both sides of the aisle. And so people felt that he could take over he could take the job. And so
Okay.
then, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm going to have to cut us off at this point because the producer is saying time is up. With that being said, Rick Baker, former mayor of St. Petersburg, certainly we appreciate your being here. We really do.
I always enjoy
And
it.
I want to say thanks to my co-hosts for a job well done as always. And we want to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in to the Ray Tampa Podcast, 99.1 FM The Bird, and ask that you do so each and every Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. And with all of that being said, and also go to YouTube, type in the Ray Tampa Podcast, and you can see them all. With all that being said, good evening.